In part two, DeWayne talked about using the stock market to gain the capital necessary for real estate purchases. Now we talk about real estate investment strategies and management. Oh gosh, throughout my years of being a professor, I have had so many students express interest in real estate. And I will have to say, I didn't intentionally get into like the real estate investment game, but I would have to say that a lot of my financial success has also been due to real estate buys that worked out really well at the right time, offloading them at the right time, and those sorts of things. And so, what are certain qualities that you look for in an area before investing in the real estate of that area?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things, especially with Valdosta, I mean, Valdosta is a high rent type of area, or you got to have a location that is high economy. I mean, so like Atlanta, for example, you can perceivably do very well there. But a lot of times, and then if you get in a sort of a dry area, I hate to pick on some of our neighboring cities and counties, but I'm not going to name any. But you can get in an area to where it's just not a whole lot of rent capability, and it doesn't matter what you put your money into; it's not going to rent that frequently. And so that's one of the main characteristics, with regard to where to actually purchase rentals. People in Orlando do very well because obviously you got the Magic Kingdom down there. So it's a huge bubble of real estate opportunity. I mean, you've got like whole townhouse communities that are just basically rentals because of the tourism that comes down and does sort of Airbnb type stays there. So it varies, but you got to look at the market. We have a very good mix here in Lowndes County, primarily strictly with Lowndes County. I would even go down to just saying Valdosta itself is very strong because you've got the college community that is a rental based community. You also have a very workforce based community rather than a home ownership community in Valdosta. And then you also have the others that are on outliers. You got Wild Adventures, you got Moody Air Force Base, airmen that come in that either need a place to stay or they're off of the base housing and want to actually be in a single family home to grow their family. So I mean, it's a number of areas to where rentals do very well in this area as a result. Now, the higher prices, that's debatable whether or not you can get much higher prices beyond a certain threshold.
Yeah. Let's talk about that Airbnb
Yeah.
tourism driven rentals versus long-term, kind of single family year-long sorts of leases. What's your feeling about the differences between those? I definitely have some opinions, so I look forward to yours and then I'll
Yeah,
talk
and
about my opinion.
yeah. I hope you have some different opinions because quite frankly, we love it because as initial long-term rental investors, we've done long-term rentals since 2010, and here we are, sort of early 2020s, if you will, as far as when we really started doing a more Airbnb type of portfolio. But with that, having the backdrop of long-term rentals, we found that Airbnbs are better to manage because long-term rentals, what happens is that you've got somebody occupying the space, and again, across a wide slice of type of renters. But at some point, the wider part of that slice is a group of renters that no matter the income level, your place is not going to look the same as when you turn it over to them at the move in. So that cycle is shorter with Airbnbs. And so it's very easy to maintain at that point because most people want that 5-star rating when they leave. And so they're going to put the place close to back to where it was when you had them first walk in. And that makes it much easier to turn around perhaps the next day for someone else to come in. Now, the draw to that, small draw, is it does take a bit of time, perhaps, depending on your ramp up, but it takes some time as far as capital to get your Airbnb to catch on. because you got to have the capital to buy the furniture. With the long-term rental, everyone's bringing in their furniture, and you don't have to, buy anything in general. But with short-term rentals, you do have to start. That startup cost is what's required, though.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have a very different perspective. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah, go
very
ahead.
interested. So, were you managing your own Airbnbs, or do you have
Yes.
like a property management
No,
company?
that's basically what we do. We
Oh, you do?
manage.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So, and my perspective was the like every Saturday was ruined for me. It's like, okay, the cleaner's
Uh,
gonna call, and what is going to have been damaged every Saturday? What am I gonna have to deal with every Saturday?
man, yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's just like kind of constant, like, because ours was in a really our Airbnb rental was in a very high desirability area in terms of it was a private island just north of Hilton Head, and it would rent out a full year in advance, right? So I mean, we weren't worrying about bookings, and I would say there's definitely a higher price and profit margin in the short-term rentals than there is in the, because you could actually basically charge for a week what you would charge for a month, short-term versus long-term. So there is definitely that, but just that constant, like they're on vacation, they just want to have fun. And so for me, we did see, even though it was an expensive area, it was an expensive house, it was a private island, it was not damage every week, but just that dreaded phone call every Saturday from my cleaning company. It's like,
Yeah,
what did they find this time?
yeah.
Towels are constantly missing, and this is constantly damaged. And so for me, it's like, oh, if I could just have, like, if all I had to do was once a month make sure I got my monthly paycheck or my monthly rental check. But I agree, like I feel, because I'm kind of a control freak, I would have to have some sort of reason to check the water heater or something every
I know,
day, or not
right?
every day, but every month on the long-term rental, just a monthly pop in, make sure that they're not, letting the toilet overflow onto the carpet.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Have you all had long-term rental experience?
See, no, I don't have it to compare to that. So
Believe me, believe me.
the short term's better. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I was ready to get out of the short-term rental. We did.
I mean, that I get what you're saying, because it's more frequent. It's a new set of people, new perspectives of those individuals, new
Yeah.
desires and expectations when they're in. Things happen also. So every
Yeah.
cycle, it's something liable to happen
Yes.
or could happen. The thing about long-term rentals, though, is that um, at some point you deal with people that you got to get out.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes a bit more of a nuisance. At some point, the structure of the place has to be attended to, and it
Yeah.
becomes a higher bill than
Right.
just towels.
Yeah.
So when you have that difference in perspective, like for me, I'm like, I'd be glad to have to buy some missing towels. I mean,
Every week.
yeah, I know, I know. It can be annoying also, I know.
Very annoying. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. And I was new. So I think this is actually probably good. Like, there are a lot of people who, if they're just getting started in this, they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I've heard about. Now Airbnb is having a whole thing. Like, I just saw Airbnb maybe being kicked out of New York, right? So I mean,
Oh,
like, there's some
yeah.
regulatory issues with Airbnb that will probably impact whether and how successful that is going to be as a strategy moving forward. But yeah, so I mean, just do your homework, right? Just
Right.
watch
And that's
this
one thing you have
podcast
to
and
look at as
other
well. I mean,
podcasts.
because Valdosta is one of those areas where, I either for or against. I mean, there's really not much regulation
Yeah.
in Valdosta, because there's a whole, biasness, if you will, against how far rents can go.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're dealing with affordable housing needs here in Valdosta, that is a point to make. But on the flip side of that, unfortunately, in that case, there really is no real limit on what a landlord could charge for housing. So that works better for the investor, is my point. for now and for some foreseeable future, because from a politics standpoint, I don't think Valdosta, Lowndes County really wants to upset their home base, if you will, of people who have
Right.
pretty much been ingrained in the family business of wealth accumulation.
While we didn't explicitly mention the term passive income, I think you can tell from our conversation that real estate investing isn't as passive as some will want you to believe. Somebody is going to have to manage the properties, whether they are short term or long term. If you manage them yourself, you're going to maintain more of the margins. If you turn it over to somebody else, you'll obviously be cutting into the income portion of passive income. So I just want to go on record dispelling the myth of real estate investing as passive income. Stay tuned for part 4 when DeWayne will discuss how networking has contributed to his success.